Part 2, Terrors of the Void. Chapter 4, A Friend Indeed. En route to the Rock of Brul, the characters discovered a derelict nautiloid drifting in an asteroid field. Only too late did they realize that another, more dangerous ship was lurking nearby, waiting to spring its trap. A night spider crewed by Nyogi has made its presence known, but the characters aren't forced to deal with any new problems. The timely arrival of a naval patrol drives off the Nyogi raiders, after which the patrol sees the party safely to the Rock of Brul. There, the characters part ways with Captain Sartell, who encourages them to seek out a GIF insurgent named Commodore Crux. The GIF brings the characters to his spell-jamming vessel, the Second Wind. They set out into wild space pursued by Haystane, a deadly ally of the Xaryxian Empire. Before running this session, familiarize yourself with the Rock of Brul, which is described in Chapter 3 of the Astral Adventurer's Guide. When the characters finally arrive at the rock, you can show players the poster map of the asteroid city. Night Spider dead ahead. The Nyogi ship bearing down on the Moondancer at the end of Chapter 3 is a night spider called the Ebon Snare. See Chapter 2 of the Astral Adventurer's Guide for more information on night spiders. The Ebon Snare is crewed by 8 Nyogi pirates, Cebu's Astral Menagerie, and 20 commoners of various races and alignments, whom the Nyogi have enslaved. The Nyogi also keep 2 Umber Hulks on board for use as shock troops during their raids. The Night Spider is 250 feet away from the Moondancer when the characters spot it. The characters likely have little chance of repelling the Nyogi boarding party, especially if they have just fought off the Surlons hiding aboard the derelict nautiloid in Chapter 3. Luckily, a patrol from the Rock of Brul happens upon the characters just in time to save them from having to fight the Nyogi. Alternatively, if the characters avoided encountering the Surlons or seem eager to test their mettle against the Night Spider's crew, allow a group of 4 Nyogi pirates and 1 Umber Hulk to board the Moondancer, then have the patrol arrive at a suitably dramatic moment during the fight. To the rescue. As the Night Spider approaches the Moondancer, or after a few rounds of battle, if you decide to allow the characters and the Nyogi to clash, read. Suddenly, 2 galleons glide into view and begin pummeling the Night Spider with ballista bolts and mangonel stones, forcing it to break off its attack and make for the cover of the asteroids. The newly arrived space galleons are the Stalwart and the Incorrigible, both under the command of a lawful neutral Githyanki buccaneer, Cebu's Astral Menagerie, named Darvik. The Stalwart's crew consists of 18 bandits of various races and alignments. The crew of the Incorrigible consists of 18 Hadozi shipmates, Cebu's Astral Menagerie, of various alignments. The spelljammer aboard each ship is a lawful neutral, human mage. Commander Darvik, aboard the Incorrigible, is familiar with both the Moondancer and its captain, whom he considers little better than a pirate, though the Githyanki grudgingly respects Elena Sartell's commission. His ship pulls up alongside the Moondancer so that Darvik can hail Captain Sartell and ask where the Moondancer is headed. She tells him that the Moondancer is going to the Rock of Brul, and Darvik offers to provide an escort, an offer Sartell readily accepts in the wake of the Night Spider's ambush. If the Moondancer appears to be under the control of someone other than Captain Sartell, such as Trevuse, the Astral Elves, or the characters, Darvik is suspicious and insists on escorting the ship back to the Rock of Brul, where he has it impounded until the question of its ownership can be resolved. Whether or not the characters allow him to do this is up to them. If Captain Sartell is compelled to refuse Darvik's offer of escort, perhaps because someone is holding her ship hostage or using magic to control her behavior, the Githyanki commander wishes her safe travels and sets his ships in pursuit of the Night Spider. Welcome to the Rock. When the characters arrive at the Rock of Brul, read or paraphrase the following box text. Sunlight illuminates the rooftops and spires of a city built across the top of a gigantic asteroid. The asteroid's underside has structures as well, including fortresses and giant sails. Wooden docks protrude from one end of the asteroid, and a variety of ships are moored there. Space-dwelling fish scatter in front of you as your ship adjusts its heading until the docks are straight ahead and level with the ship's main deck. Pier workers stand ready to catch ropes and tie off the ship as it glides alongside one of the docks and slows to a stop. Welcome to the Rock, says Captain Sartell. This is where we part ways. If she hasn't done so already, Captain Sartell urges the characters to seek out Commodore Crux, a GIF who has clashed with Astral Elves in the past and who might be able to help the characters plan their next move. Sartell knows that Crux can usually be found at the Happy Beholder, a popular tavern. The characters are free to explore the city. If the party puts off meeting Crux for too long, move the story forward by having Captain Sartell send them a message that astral elves are searching for them, and they need to get off the rock fast. Commodore Crux. Characters who venture to the Happy Beholder can find Commodore Crux there, day or night, nursing a hefty flagon of ale. When the characters enter the tavern, read. A large, spherical creature with eye stalks and a watchful central eye tends bar in this establishment. Filling one side of a table meant for 6 is a broad-chested, hippo-headed man with a green parrot perched on one shoulder. The haggard figure squints at you over the top of an enormous tankard, then waves invitingly to the seats across from him. Commodore Crux. Crux is a lawful good gift shipmate, Cebu's astral menagerie, a soldier who believes his glory days are behind him. Crux has spent the last few years working as a mercenary on and around the Rock of Brul, but lately the GIF has been spending more time in his cups as new jobs have become fewer and farther between. The parrot perched on Crux's shoulder isn't his, the bird belongs to Large Luigi, the tavern's beholder proprietor. Luigi uses the parrot to help cheer up downtrodden patrons. Crux's demeanor brightens if the characters mention what's happening to their home world or start to describe their encounter with the astral elves in Chapter 2. The GIF leans forward intently, shoves his tankard to the side, and implores the characters to tell him everything. Crux grows visibly excited as he listens to the party's tale. By the end of it, he is willing to aid the characters in their effort to save their world from what he calls the Xaryxian Empire, based on similar attacks he has heard about occurring on other worlds. Crux is tight-lipped regarding his own history with the Xaryxian Empire as well as how he plans to help the characters, indicating that it is best not to say too much where others might overhear. A fleet of astral elf ships visited the Rock of Brul a few days before launching the attack on your world. The elves gave fair warning to various captains on the rock, urging them to steer clear of your world lest their ships be fired upon. The elves undoubtedly left spies behind to make sure their warnings were heeded. Thus we continue this chat aboard my ship. On the way to Crux's ship, the characters are accosted by 4 lawful evil astral elf warriors, Cebu's astral menagerie, wearing cloaks and visors to conceal their identities. These elves, named Farfrin, Helix, Kakarian, and Lannis, seek to avenge the defeat of Captain Asmadian and the Dark Star by killing the characters in the streets. Godaric Main, the proconsul to Prince Andrew of Brul, has given these emissaries diplomatic immunity. As a result, there's no one to stand in the elf's way. If he is present, Crux fights alongside the characters but is poisoned for the duration of the fight, due to his drunkenness. If the characters are in danger of being defeated by the astral elves, a dozen commoners begin throwing stones and food at the astral elves. A few brazen locals even start attacking the elves with sticks and clubs. Realizing they're outnumbered, the elves withdraw while threatening to finish off the characters later. The Second Wind. Crux hurriedly ushers the party toward the docks in hopes of making a quick getaway aboard his ship. As the characters make their way to the Rock of Brul's docks with Crux at their side, read. Stately galleons, sleek cutters that resemble flying fish, and warships built to look like hammerhead sharks line the docks of Brul. Crux waves his arm toward a craft that seems modest by comparison. The ship's sails are patchworks of mended canvas, while its hull seems barely held together by thick vines that bind it like rope. Its strangest feature is the full-grown tree that sprouts from the aft deck. The Second Wind, Crux declares pridefully. Isn't she something? The Second Wind is a living ship equipped with 2 jolly boats called Little Boom and Big Bluster. See the Jolly Boats sidebar. See Chapter 2 of the Astral Adventurer's Guide for the living ship's deck plans and weaponry. The living ship's spelljamming helm, located below decks, looks like an antique chair with golden upholstery and arms sculpted to look like smiling dolphins. The right arm is loose and falls off easily, which has no effect on the item's functionality, and the chair reeks of stale ale. The chair is held aloft and stabilized by green crystals under the seat that project a magical green circle onto the floor. As Crux and the characters board the vessel, they are accosted by its current captain, Fel Ardra, a chaotic neutral, tiefling cult fanatic who has been renting use of the ship from Crux. Fel is irate at Crux because she still has 40 days left on her lease, and the tiefling is preparing to undertake a big job when the party arrives. Jolly Boats. A spell-jamming ship can be outfitted with 1 or more jolly boats, which use the rowboat statistics in the Dungeon Master's Guide. In space, jolly boats are used to cross the gulf between two ships whose gravity planes and air envelopes intersect, on occasions when bringing the bigger ships alongside each other would be risky, or to travel to or from a pier that is either too small or too crowded to accommodate a larger vessel. A jolly boat can be lowered into the gravity plane of a larger ship or object, where it bobs like a boat in water. A jolly boat is too small to support a spelljamming helm, so the crew must use oars to steer and propel it as it floats in the gravity plane. A jolly boat without a gravity plane to float in becomes uncontrollable, though its own air envelope has enough air to sustain one crew member for 8 hours or 4 crew members for 2 hours each. Fel Ardra. Fel Ardra is a capable spelljammer who, under different circumstances, could make a comfortable living selling her services to other captains. As it happens, though, the tiefling has turned to smuggling to make enough coin to buy her way out of an infernal contract she entered into many years ago. Fel Ardra. Although Crux doesn't approve of Fel's line of business, the GIF has had a soft spot for her ever since the two met. Fel sees their relationship as purely transactional, but Crux is convinced the tiefling has a heart of gold, and he keeps trying to persuade her to give up smuggling. Now, with the party's arrival, Crux envisions the makings of a grand adventure, one he hopes that he and the characters can convince Fel to join. For her part, Fel is indifferent to the party's plight and says that if Crux wants his ship back ahead of time, he'll have to refund the rest of her lease payment, which amounts to 400 GP. Crux says he is prepared to pay her back. Fel, however, can sense the GIF's desperation, so she insists on also being compensated for the lost revenue of her next venture, which she figures to be 3,000 GP. A character who makes a successful DC 15 Wisdom, Insight, check realizes Fel is bluffing. The tiefling secretly reckons she would be lucky to clear 1,000 GP, but she has always suspected Crux of having deep pockets and has no qualms about trying to gouge him. In truth, Crux has squandered most of his money and can barely afford to return the balance of Fel's lease payment, let alone pay the extra amount she's demanding. Negotiation is not Crux's strong suit, and the GIF turns to the characters for help in convincing Fel to let them use the ship. A character can do so by impressing upon her the urgency of the party's mission and succeeding on a DC 18 Charisma, Intimidation or Persuasion check. The check is made with advantage if the characters refund the rest of Fel's lease payment, 400 GP. If the check fails, Fel is unmoved and further attempts by that character to sway her fall on deaf ears. If the party doesn't have any spellcasters, Crux points out that they will need to hire a spelljammer. If the party tries to retain Fel's services for this purpose, the tiefling insists on a fee of 1,000 GP in addition to whatever agreement they reach regarding her other demands. If it's obvious the party can't pay what she's asking up front, Fel is willing to accompany them in exchange for a 25% share of any treasure they find until she is paid in full. If the party threatens to take the second wind by force, Fel storms off the ship. Within an hour, she finds 4 veterans who are willing to help her retake the ship. These veterans are armed with pistols, range 30/90ths of a foot, instead of heavy crossbows. If the second wind isn't gone by the time she returns, Fel and her hired guns attack. Flinch. The first mate of the second wind is a neutral good Hadozi explorer, Cebu's astral menagerie, whom Crux refers to as Mr. Flinch. The Hadozi is also a skilled seamster, the repairs to the ship's sails are his work. Upon meeting the characters, the friendly Hadozi begins offering unsolicited guidance on how to improve their wardrobes. Flinch is an old comrade in arms of Commodore Crux and stands by the GIF through thick and thin. The Hadozi knows about Crux's history with the astral elves but says nothing of it, replying, if pressed, that 'tis not my tale to tell. Flinch has spent the last several months keeping an eye on the ship for Crux while serving in Fel's crew. He is relieved to have Crux back on board and glad to see his friend in such high spirits, though he privately worries that if their upcoming mission should fail, that might be more than the old soldier could bear. Starbuff. The tree rooted to the second wind's stern castle is a Trent named Starbuff, who is largely indifferent to the aims of either Crux or the party. Like many of its kind, the Trent considers most humanoids' problems to be fleeting affairs and takes a much longer view of life. Within Starbuff's reach are 10 mangonel stones, which the Trent can throw like rocks to the edge of wild space. Once the characters are aboard the second wind and safely off the Rock of Brul, Crux reveals his plan to them, to travel to another wild space system called Doomspace, where enemies of the Xaryxian Empire are assembling a coalition. Crux believes that the characters' only hope of saving their planet lies in joining the coalition. Crux doesn't know much about Doomspace, though, so the ship's immediate destination is a lonely tower on an asteroid, where a wizard cartographer named Topola lives. Topola is Crux's friend, and he's certain she will be able to provide him with a map of Doomspace. Her tower is at the very edge of the wild space system. Having a new venture to occupy his thoughts lifts Crux's spirits. The Giff stops drinking and moves about his ship with purpose and authority, barking out orders like the military commander he once was. Anytime the conversation turns to Crux's history with the Xaryxian Empire, however, the Giff becomes quiet and brooding. It's obvious there is a painful memory Crux doesn't feel comfortable sharing yet. If pressed, the Giff waves dismissively, muttering, "Things are bound to turn out differently this time." More information about Crux's secret can be found in Chapter 7. Ruthless Rhaegar. Because of their exploits earlier in this adventure, the characters have unknowingly made an enemy of Haystane, a chaotic, evil Rhaegar, Cebu's astral menagerie, who lives in a small palace on the Rock of Brol. Haystane is a longtime ally of the Xaryxian Empire, which holds a grudge against Commodore Crux, for reasons described in Chapter 7. Haystane's spies have been watching the Giff, reporting on his activities and contacts. When word of the recent altercation between the characters and the astral elves gets back to Haystane, the Rhaegar decides to punish the characters for their insolence. Haystane pursues them in an aesthetic, Cebu's astral menagerie, which trails the second wind at a safe distance. Once it becomes obvious that the party is heading to meet Topola, a wizard the Rhaegar knows by reputation, Haystane decides to put an end to the characters' meddling. Closing in from behind is a gigantic, bioluminescent, jellyfish-like creature with a flamboyantly dressed figure standing inside its glassy dome. Haystane. The aesthetic is 250 feet away at the start of the battle and tries to get close enough to attack the second wind with its tentacles. The Rhaegar casts Dimension Door on their first turn, using the spell to board the party's ship. When that happens, read. A magical doorway appears on the main deck of your ship. The flamboyantly dressed figure steps through it brandishing a trident, and the doorway closes behind them. Sparkling light surrounds the figure. Heading to Topola's tower, are we? I don't think so. My friends in the Xaryxian Empire don't want you meddling in their affairs. But forgive me, I haven't introduced myself. My name is Haystane. When the elves came looking for a suitable world to nourish their dying star, I suggested yours. It isn't every day I get to witness the destruction of a planet. I promise, it will end beautifully, even if you're not alive to see it. Haystane uses Summon Golem on their second turn in combat. While the Rhaegar and the Golem attack the characters, the aesthetic uses Jammer Scream against the second wind, then moves close enough to the ship to attack with its tentacles if it isn't close enough already. Victory. If Haystane dies, the aesthetic uses Jammer Scream against the second wind if the ship's spelljamming helm hasn't already been disabled. If the characters win the battle but their spelljamming helm is disabled, read. You have won a victory, but at what cost? You're stranded on a ship without a functional spelljamming helm, adrift in the vast ocean of wild space. Here ends Chapter 4. Defeat. If the characters and their allies are defeated, the Rhaegar returns to the aesthetic and commands it to demolish what's left of the second wind. Enough of the ship's air envelope remains to keep any surviving characters and crew members alive for 8 hours. If Haystane prevails but the aesthetic did not survive, the Rhaegar takes control of the second wind and flies it back to the Rock of Brol, but only after jettisoning the characters and crew and leaving them with enough flotsam and jetsam around them to provide only an hour or two of breathable air. Here ends Chapter 4. Chapter 5, Living on the Edge. The Xaryxian Empire attacked the characters' world, forcing them to take refuge on the Rock of Brol. There, they met a sympathetic Giff named Crux. Aboard his ship, the Second Wind, the characters headed to a wizard's tower on the outskirts of wild space, where Crux hopes to acquire a map. En route to the tower, the Second Wind was attacked by Haystane, an evil ally of the Xaryxian Empire. If the Second Wind was disabled or destroyed in the last session, the characters get to the wizard's tower with the help of a pod of migrating Kindori. Once they reach their destination, Crux and the characters hope to obtain a map of Doomspace from Topola, a reclusive wizard. After defeating a void scaver named Big Mama, the characters seek out a notorious pirate who might be willing to join their fight against the Xaryxian Empire. Adrift. If the second wind is intact and its spelljamming helm is functional, skip ahead to Topola's Tower. If the second wind was destroyed or its spelljamming helm was disabled, read the following text to begin the session. Crux takes a drag from his pipe. Settle in, everyone. We could be here for a while. The characters have enough time to take a short rest before the Kindori arrive. Kindori Pod. An hour after the events of the previous chapter, the characters encounter a pod of 6 Kindori, Cebu's astral menagerie, flying across space along a migration route. The Kindori defend themselves if attacked but otherwise pose no threat. The Kindori keep their distance, staying at least 100 feet away from the crew of the second wind. The Kindori are, however, attracted to lights. If the characters don't think of it themselves, Commodore Crux encourages someone to flash or wave a light to get the pod's attention. Flashing or waving a light causes 1 or 2 Kindori to approach within 15 feet of the light's source, while the remaining Kindori keep their distance. Lassoing and riding a Kindori. A character who has a rope can use an action to try to lasso a Kindori, treating the rope as an improvised ranged weapon. Alternatively, a character within reach of a Kindori can try to climb onto its body as an action, doing so with a successful DC 15 Strength, Athletics check. Lassoing or riding a Kindori doesn't cause it to attack. A Kindori lashed to the second wind with rope pulls the ship across space in whatever direction it is headed. Crux knows the way to Topola's Tower and can indicate which direction the Kindori must go to reach it. The tower isn't along the whale's migration path, so a character must coax the Kindori into altering course. As an action, a character mounted on a Kindori can try to guide it in a particular direction, doing so with a successful DC 15 Wisdom, Animal Handling, check. This check has advantage if the character has some way to communicate with the Kindori, telepathy, for example. If the check fails, the Kindori refuses to alter course. If the check fails by 5 or more, the Kindori also dislodges the character, who is pushed 10 feet away from the Kindori before falling into its gravity plane. With the help of 1 or more Kindori, the characters arrive at Topola's Tower after 72 hours of travel, after which the Kindori resume their migration. If the second wind is intact and its spell-jamming helm becomes operational before then, Crux orders the characters to release the Kindori so the creatures can go on their way. Topola's Tower. Topola's Tower is perched on a flat-topped asteroid with an air envelope that extends 180 feet above and below the asteroid and 100 feet away from its sides. The asteroid's gravity plane intersects it horizontally at the level of the docks and the base of the tower. Topola's Tower. View player version. As the tower comes into view, read. A crooked tower perches atop a small asteroid, surrounded by a cloud of twinkling cosmic dust. Through his spyglass, Crux examines the rock upon which the tower stands and the decrepit wooden pier that juts from one side of it. Mr. Flinch, he says, ready the jolly. If the second wind was lost in the previous chapter, characters can ride the Kindori to the dock. Otherwise, Crux is concerned about the poor state of Topola's dock and fears the second wind might accidentally smash it to flinders or rip it off its moorings. For this reason, he orders Flinch to deploy a jolly boat while the second wind remains 100 feet away, its gravity plane aligned with the gravity plane of the asteroid. Flinch uses a winch to lower Big Bluster, one of the second wind's jolly boats, into the overlapping gravity planes of Topola's Tower and the second wind. Characters can use the 6 oars aboard the jolly boat to propel it to the docks while Crux stands proudly in the bow, pointing to the dock as if the destination were not obvious. Approaching the dock. As Crux and the characters make their way to the dock, read. Scores of pelicans, mollymawks, and smaller birds nesting on the asteroid squawk as you approach the rickety dock. At the end of the dock, 2 gray, shark-like creatures fight over the remains of a pelican. A woman with frayed robes and bare feet sits in a rocking chair at the base of the tower watching the fracas, her face half hidden by a wide-brimmed hat that has a blue jay perched on it. The woman leaps to her feet, brandishes a staff, and snarls, "Go on, git." A fiery ray springs from her fingertip, frightening away the shark-like creatures. The woman is Topola, a chaotic good mage. She is elated to receive visitors, especially since one of them is her old friend Crux. After welcoming Crux and his companions to her tower, Topola insists on showing the characters her abode. See tour of the tower below. If Crux or the characters mention the purpose of their visit, to acquire a map of Doomspace, Topola tells them she'll talk business only after the tour is over. Tower features. Aside from its crooked architecture, Topola's tower has the following features. Autognomes. When Topola purchased an expensive telescope from Orwick Cogsworth, a gnome inventor on the Rock of Brull, he threw in 8 autognomes, Cebu's astral menagerie, that he built in his likeness, each sporting a dazzling metal mustache. The indifferent autognomes have the 3 directives common to all their kind plus the following directive: defend Topola from hostile creatures. Topola and her birds. Birds. Harmless birds nest in all areas of the tower. Ceilings and floors. Openings in the floors and ceilings connect the tower's 3 levels. A magical rope and pulley mechanism serves as an elevator. A creature need only grab hold of the rope and say up or down to be hoisted or lowered 1 floor as desired. Illumination. Continual flame spells bathe the interior in bright light. Topola can suppress or reactivate the illumination on a particular floor by clapping 3 times while she is on that floor. Walls. From the outside, the tower initially appears to have no windows. Topola can cause an open window, up to 4 feet wide by 10 feet tall, to appear on any wall simply by touching it, or she can make a window disappear with a snap of her fingers. A creature in a window, perhaps sitting on the sill, when the opening disappears is pushed out of the tower a split second before the window vanishes. Tour of the tower. Topola gives the characters a quick look at each floor of her tower, showing them how to operate the rope and pulley device to get from one floor to the next. The box text describing each floor of the tower includes information that Topola gives during her tour. First floor. 4 ring-shaped garden terraces line the walls of this cylindrical chamber. The gardens are vertically spaced every 10 feet and brimming with luscious fruits, vegetables, and golden wheat. 4 mechanical gnomes wearing harnesses tend to the plants. The harnesses are attached to ropes that loop around pulleys affixed to the ceiling, enabling the gnomes to hoist themselves into the air and move from one plot to another. Most of my sustenance comes from these gardens, says Topola. I get regular deliveries of fresh soil from Dover merchants, and they get homegrown food and birds' eggs in return. The 4 autognomes, Cebu's astral menagerie, here are named Orwick 1, Orwick 3, Orwick 6, and Orwick 8. Their rope and pulley harnesses enable them to tend to the gardens. Second floor. This floor houses a modest kitchen where 2 mechanical gnomes are preparing dinner. Furnishings include an unmade bed, a wardrobe topped with bird nests, and a bookshelf packed with astrological texts and more bird nests. Here are my living quarters, says Topola, where I read my books and take my meals. My autognomes have no shortage of recipes. Today's repast is a deep-fried night scaver steak with a lunar bechamel. The 2 autognomes, Cebu's astral menagerie, Orwick 2 and Orwick 4, pay no mind to guests as they prepare Topola's next meal. Treasure. Topola's wardrobe contains an assortment of wizardly garments, including a robe of useful items, and her spellbook, the cover of which is splattered with dried bird droppings. The spellbook contains all the spells Topola has prepared plus the following: Air Bubble, Grease, Haste, and Rary's Telepathic Bond. Spells marked with an asterisk appear in the Astral Adventurer's Guide. Third floor. 2 mechanical gnomes are using rags to polish a 10-foot-long copper telescope in the center of this chamber. Dozens of star maps lie atop tables that are also littered with sketches of planets and otherworldly landscapes. And here is my observatory, remarks Topola proudly. I acquired my autognomes from the same fellow who sold me this telescope, which allows me to spy on all the worlds in this system and gaze at stars in other systems as well. Topola walks across the room and touches a wall, whereupon a tall opening appears in front of the telescope. Would you care to have a look? The 2 autognomes, Cebu's astral menagerie, Orwick 5 and Orwick 7, keep a close eye on visitors. The telescope is pointed at the character's home world. Topola has been observing the planet for the past several days. Anyone who looks through the telescope can see crystalline vines engulfing the planet. Star maps. The observatory contains 42 maps of various wild space systems. None of them depict Doomspace or Xaryxis space, the 2 other systems featured in this adventure. Treasure. A wild space orrery, See the Astral Adventurer's Guide, rests on a shelf. Topola acquired this magic item from a mercane trader some time ago but lost interest in the item because it makes her feel obsolete. Obtaining a map. After finishing her tour, Topola is ready to talk business. She starts the conversation with "What brings you to my tower?" When she finds out that Crux was expecting her to have a map of Doomspace, Topola reluctantly says she doesn't have one. But to take its place, she is willing to part with the Wildspace orrery she keeps in her observatory. In exchange, she asks the characters to agree to dispose of a local threat. A void scaver has started prowling around my tower. I call her Big Mama because she's enormous. I'm surprised you didn't come across her, but then, she can be hard to see, except for her single red eye. I'll give you my Wildspace orrery if you slay Big Mama for me. Topola trusts Crux and the characters to make good on their promise to kill Big Mama. Before giving them the Wildspace orrery, Topola explains how it works. This gizmo shows you where you are in relation to the planets, moons, and sun in a Wildspace system, but you must be in Wildspace to use it. To get to another system, you must first enter the Astral Sea, which will take you wherever you want to go. Once you reach your destination, use the orrery to get your bearings. As they leave her tower and head back to their ship, she wishes them luck saving their world from annihilation. If Crux and the characters no longer have a ship, Topola allows them to stay with her until another ship arrives, in which case you should modify the rest of this chapter as follows. Modify the "Oh, Mama" encounter so that the Void Scaver attacks characters who loiter outside Topola's tower or on the dock. An hour after Big Mama is defeated, a cosmic storm engulfs Topola's tower. While marveling at the storm, Topola conveys the information in the Old Flame section. During the cosmic storm, Grimesode Garganhale pays Topola a visit. Conclude with the last breath, skipping over Garganhale's fleet. "Oh, Mama." Ask the players which character has the Wildspace orrery. If none of the characters want to carry it, Crux takes it. With the item in their possession, Crux and the characters can hop aboard their jolly boat and return to the second wind. Have Crux and each character make a DC 21 Wisdom Perception check. Those who fail the check are surprised when Big Mama attacks. As the jolly boat approaches the second wind, an enormous jet-black behemoth glides out of the darkness and cosmic dust, its red eye glowing brightly as its jaws open wide. Long, stringy strands of saliva break off into weightless globs as the ravenous monster descends from above. Big Mama. Big Mama, a void scaver, Cebu's astral menagerie, starts the encounter 40 feet from the character's jolly boat, which is 50 feet from the end of Topola's dock and the same distance away from the second wind. On its first turn, the Void Scaver swims up to the jolly boat and attacks a random character. Characters who were surprised can't act until the next round. A character can use an action and a pair of oars to row the jolly boat 10 feet horizontally in any direction along the gravity plane shared by Topola's asteroid and the second wind. Unlike the jolly boat, Big Mama flies through space like a fish through water and can move in any direction. Belly of the Beast. If slain, Big Mama regurgitates a partially digested dwarf skeleton wearing a fish suit. See the Astral Adventurer's Guide. Old Flame. After the incident with Big Mama, it dawns on Topola that she might know someone willing to help the characters further. She casts Fly on herself and lands on the deck of the second wind shortly after the characters are back on board but before the ship departs. Topola offers to introduce the characters to a potential ally, Grimesode Garganhale. She provides the following information. Grimesode is a pirate who has fought many battles against astral elves. Grimesode and Topola had a tryst that never amounted to much and ended with a peaceful breakup. He has a small fleet of ships nearby and might be persuaded to help the characters. Garganhale owes Topola a favor. Topola doesn't mention that in the years following their breakup, Garganhale met his mortal end and rose again as a vampirate. Topola fears that the crew of the second wind might be discouraged by learning this fact before they meet Garganhale in person. A character who succeeds on a DC 15 Wisdom, Insight, check determines that Topola is withholding information about Garganhale and, if they call her out on it, can convince her to spill the beans. If she's asked about it, Topola doesn't divulge why their relationship fell apart, but she's quick to point out that she ended things with Garganhale, not the other way around. Welcome aboard? If the characters accept Topola's offer to lead them to Garganhale's fleet, she attunes to the spell-jamming helm of the second wind and pilots the ship with precision, grumbling occasionally about the vessel's lack of a battering ram. If the characters prefer to continue without Topola, she lets out a wistful sigh and hangs her head in disappointment. After giving Crux the directions to Garganhale's fleet, she tips her hat at the characters and returns to her tower for a much-needed nap. Garganhale's fleet. Whether the characters head for Garganhale's fleet or immediately set sail for Doomspace, their course takes them toward the wreckage of a recent battle. Dead ahead, you see a cloud of debris that appears to be the drifting wreckage of several ships. Crux shouts, "To arms!" Peering through his spyglass, he adds, "Looks like 3 flying fishes, 3 lampreys, 2 squid ships, and 2 star moths." Crux's count is accurate. If Topola is aboard the second wind, she recognizes the flying fish ships, lamprey ships, and squid ships. They account for roughly half of Garganhale's fleet. She is quick to add that Garganhale's flagship, a space galleon called the Last Breath, is not among the wreckage. Enough space exists between the wreckage for the second wind to pass through the area, which Crux is inclined to do unless the characters advise him to circle around the debris instead. If the second wind passes through the wreckage instead of going around it, the following events occur in sequence. Crimson Flag. A blood-red pirate flag drifting in space becomes snagged on the second wind's ballista. Drifting corpses. 2 human corpses drift close to the second wind. As they bump up against the ship's hull, the figures reveal themselves to be 2 chaotic neutral vampirates, Cebu's astral menagerie, named Giorgio Dali and Vitalia Daggermore. These survivors of the battle clamber onto the deck and ask to speak to the captain. They say they're looking for a new commission and are eager to serve. Crux won't have them under his command, however, and orders that they be destroyed. Scavenging Scavers. 3 grey scavers, Cebu's astral menagerie, pick at the drifting corpse of an astral elf warrior. Wounding a scaver causes it to dart away. Will-o-wisp. After the second wind passes through or circles around the wrecked ships, an invisible, chaotic neutral will-o-wisp slips aboard the second wind and reveals its presence. A tiny ball of light appears over the bow of the ship, quickly flies around the mast, and settles a few feet above the main deck, changing colors as it hovers in place. In a soft voice it says, "Lost, are we? Maybe I can be of assistance." The will-o-wisp was with Garganhale's fleet when the astral elves attacked. It stayed behind after the battle to feed on the life energy of the dying. It offers to guide the second wind to the location where Garganhale's fleet typically regroups. This rendezvous point is a day away. If questioned, the will-o-wisp admits that Garganhale made the mistake of attacking a star moth a while back. Since then, the astral elves have been aggressively attacking Garganhale's fleet. The will-o-wisp knows that Garganhale is always looking for new ships to join his force, which is why it wants the second wind to travel to Garganhale's rendezvous point. The Last Breath. The will-o-wisp leads the second wind to Garganhale's flagship. If the characters aren't looking for Garganhale, he finds them instead. In either case, the following scene occurs after a day's travel. You are caught in a cosmic storm. Lightning flashes through dense blue and purple clouds, illuminating the silhouette of a galleon with torn, flapping sails. Ghastly mariners stand on deck and cling to the rigging, staring at you with unblinking eyes. The second wind and the last breath are 250 feet apart at the start of this encounter. The last breath, which is badly damaged, tries to close the distance as quickly as possible. When the ships are within 50 feet of each other, Garganhale makes his presence known. The galleon's captain steps into view, a pallid, white-haired man with a barred metal mask covering the lower half of his face. His left hand detaches at the wrist, skitters up his arm to his shoulder, and waves at you with its fingers. Crux sneers at this sight and keeps one hand on his holstered pistol. "Vampirates," he hisses. Here ends Chapter 5. Chapter 6, Grave Alliance. After acquiring a wild space orrery at Topola's tower, the characters fought a void scaver named Big Mama. After that battle, Topola mentioned a possible ally in the fight against the Xaryxian Empire, a pirate named Grimesode Garganhale. Amid a cosmic storm, the characters laid eyes on Garganhale's flagship and its vampirate crew. In this chapter, the characters come to terms with Captain Grimesode Garganhale, who confesses that Xaryxian vessels have all but destroyed his fleet. His badly damaged flagship, the Last Breath, is all that remains after multiple engagements with the astral elves. The vampirate captain nevertheless still vows to destroy the Xaryxian Empire, but unbeknownst to him, His crew is on the verge of mutiny after their latest defeat. Ship of the Dead. The Last Breath is a space galleon that has been reduced to 90 hit points. Unless the characters take defensive measures, the galleon comes close enough for its captain, Grimesode Garganhale, to be heard. Garganhale is a chaotic neutral vampirate captain, see Boo's Astral Menagerie. He strikes a dramatic pose as he addresses Crux and the characters, toward whom he is friendly. The undead captain places his boot on the rail along the deck of his creaky galleon and leans over the bow. His disembodied hand perches on his shoulder, and lightning from the cosmic storm flashes behind him. Garganhale's tone of voice is inviting, but his dead black eyes glint with malice. It's dangerous out here. That menace from Xaryxis, Commander Vale, keeps sending ships to our system, but we do our part to thin the Astral Elves' ranks. You're obviously not with them. Care to identify yourselves? Garganhale lost his left hand in a sword fight years ago. The hand, which Garganhale calls Lefty, was later animated as a crawling claw. The disembodied hand can play instruments and communicate using simple gestures. If Topola is in sight, Captain Garganhale's posture briefly slumps like that of a wounded animal. He then puffs out his chest, raises an eyebrow in her direction, and adds the following. Do my lifeless eyes deceive me? Topola, my darling, what a surprise. If you've come to drive a stake through my heart, you'll have to return it first. After making introductions, the vampirate captain confesses that his flagship and its crew are all that remains of his fleet. The rest fell prey to ships under the command of Vale, whom Garganhale calls the scourge of pirates, raiders, and anyone else who refuses to bow to the might of Xaryxis. Despite these cautionary words, Garganhale tells any belligerent or opportunistic characters that his crew has already died once, and they won't hesitate to do so again in defense of their ship. In conversation, Garganhale is placid and convincing, but his words carry the bite of a vampire scorned. He warms quickly to characters who echo his distaste for the Xaryxian Empire. Grimesode Garganhale. Parleying with Garganhale. Garganhale wants to see the Xaryxian Empire crumble, but he's wary of embarking on a voyage to doomspace alongside a bunch of nobodies. He requests permission to discuss terms in private, either aboard the character's ship or, if the second wind was lost, on Topola's rickety dock. Once Garganhale is off his ship, one or more characters can try to coax the vampirate captain into joining their cause. If one character does all the talking, have that character make a DC 15 Charisma, Persuasion check, otherwise, have all participating characters make a DC 13 Charisma, Persuasion group check. If Topola is present, characters have advantage on this check. On a successful check, Garganhale pledges to help the characters save their world from destruction, asking for nothing in return. On a failed check, Garganhale won't agree to an alliance unless Crux and the characters join his fleet, adhere to the Pirate Code, see the Pirate Code sidebar, and call him Admiral Garganhale. As the captain of the Second Wind, Crux refuses to bend his knee to a vampirate, but a character can convince the gift to swallow his pride and yield to Garganhale's authority by succeeding on a DC 16 Charisma, Intimidation or Persuasion check. If no one succeeds on this check, Crux ends the impasse by offering to step down as captain of the Second Wind for the remainder of the mission, yielding command to any character who can tolerate undead allies better than he can. When the two parties come to an agreement, Garganhale bows deeply and invites the characters aboard his ship to celebrate their alliance with a bottle of champagne du la Stomp. But before the characters can take him up on his offer, Garganhale is betrayed, see mutiny below. Pirate Code. Grimesode Garganhale expects those under his command to abide by the following rules. Article 1. Don't eat each other. No crew member shall partake of another crew member's flesh or drink their blood. Article 2. No hymns. Many crew members' ears are sensitive to holy praise. While aboard the ship, bards and other musicians are allowed to play only secular tunes. Article 3. Coward's consequence. Those who abandon their post or shirk their duty shall be marooned. Article 4. No shipboard conflicts. All disputes shall be settled on land. At your discretion, Captain Garganhale's code can include additional rules, perhaps of your own design or suggested by the characters. Crew of the Last Breath. The crew of the Last Breath includes 8 vampirates, a vampirate mage named Rutledge Wynn, who is seated in the ship's spell-jamming helm, a dead-eyed ogre zombie, and a tiefling ghost named Agony, See Boo's Astral Menagerie for vampirate stat blocks. The following rules apply to Agony the Ghost. As long as the last breath has at least 1 hit point, the ghost can't be permanently slain. If the ghost is reduced to 0 hit points and the ship has at least 1 hit point, the ghost reforms 24 hours later in the ship's cargo hold with all its hit points. If it moves more than 100 feet from the last breath, the ghost disappears and instantly reappears in the ship's cargo hold. While away from the last breath, the ghost can use a bonus action to magically teleport back to the ship, either to the lower cargo hold, Area 13 on the Space Galleon deck plans, or a location it can see. Mutiny. The last breath? After negotiations with Garganhale conclude, but before he can return to his ship, read. The last breath turns tail and flees, leaving its captain behind. Garganhale's dark eyes widen, then narrow. What's this foul treachery? He hisses. Unbeknownst to anyone aboard the Second Wind, Agony the Ghost has taken possession of Flinch. Before the players roll initiative for their characters, read or paraphrase the following box text to them. As Garganhale bellows a curse at the dwindling stern of his ship, Flinch approaches the vampirate captain with glazed eyes and a dreamy smile. In a voice dripping with sarcasm, Flinch says, Captain Garganhale, your command of the last breath is at an end. We've had enough victory at your hands to last 10 lifetimes. The Hadozi then shudders as a horned ghost vacates his body, cackles, and disappears. Flinch blinks his eyes back into focus, then says in his normal voice, Do I smell smoke? Flinch remembers nothing of what has transpired. Agony the Ghost took possession of him long enough to deliver its rebuke, then vanished and took refuge in the last breath's cargo hold. Garganhale encourages the characters to give chase, saying, Aboard my ship is a weapon you can use against the Xaryxian Empire. Help me retake the last breath, and the weapon is yours. He refuses to elaborate until his mutinous crew is disposed of. Giving chase. If the Second Wind was destroyed earlier in the adventure, continue with shipless pursuit below. Otherwise, skip ahead to aboard the Second Wind. Shipless pursuit. Without the Second Wind, characters must use their own magic to pursue the last breath before it disappears inside the cosmic storm. If the characters have no such magic but Topala is present, she casts a fly spell on Garganhale. Once a rope is tied around him, he can pull the characters behind him as he, with a flying speed of 60 feet, catches up to the last breath, which has a flying speed of 35 feet. Characters pulled behind Garganhale must hold their breath for the short time they spend in the airless void of wild space. Aboard the Second Wind. Characters aboard the Second Wind can use this ship to pursue the last breath, which disappears in the cosmic storm. As soon as he can, Garganhale gives the Second Wind an edge in the hunt. The vampirate captain drops to his knees and traces a pattern on the deck with his right hand. A shimmering wave of magical energy washes over the ship. Garganhale then cackles in triumph, We are invisible. They won't see us coming until it's too bloody late. Garganhale has used his ship invisibility action to conceal the Second Wind, although the effect is not readily apparent to anyone aboard the vessel. To pursue the fleeing mutineers, the Second Wind must search the storm clouds in which the last breath is attempting to hide. The spelljammer of the Second Wind must make a DC 15 Wisdom, Survival, check, with advantage if one or more characters are serving as lookouts. The check can be repeated every 10 minutes until it succeeds. On a successful check, the Second Wind finds the last breath when the two vessels are 2d6 times 10 feet apart. Since no one aboard the last breath can see the invisible Second Wind or its crew, the characters can close the remaining distance and climb aboard the space galleon, becoming visible only after they leave the Second Wind. Garganhale insists on joining the boarding party to retake his ship. If the characters allow him to do so, the invisibility effect on the Second Wind ends as soon as Garganhale leaves that ship. Firing on the last breath. If the characters seem determined to fire on the last breath from a distance, Garganhale discourages this course of action. My ship is badly damaged and brimming with alchemist's fire. One well-aimed shot could cause her to explode. Better to slip aboard and dispatch the mutineers in close combat. Garganhale is not lying about the danger posed by the alchemist's fire, which is described in the next section. Boarding the last breath. The following locations are depicted on the Space Galleon deck plans in the Astral Adventurer's Guide. Locations that are not described below are assumed to contain nothing of interest. Forecastle. 6 vampirates, Cebu's astral menagerie, are here, waiting to repel boarders. They fight until destroyed, knowing Garganhale will show them no mercy if they're captured. Stern Castle. The ogre zombie and 2 vampirates, Cebu's astral menagerie, are here, waiting to repel boarders. Like the vampirates on the forecastle, these creatures fight until destroyed. 5. Spelljamming Helm. Rutledge Wynn, the vampirate mage, is here. If Rutledge is reduced to 20 hit points or fewer, he casts Dimension Door and transports himself 500 feet into wild space, then casts Fly on himself and flees. Spelljamming Helm. The ship's spelljamming helm looks like a black, tall-backed, legless wooden chair with shackles bolted to its armrests. Red crystals sprouting from the chair's underside project a red pentagon on the floor that stabilizes the helm while allowing it to swivel. 13. Lower Cargo Hold. This area contains 20 earth-filled coffins, 10 wooden kegs painted red that contain gunpowder, see explosives in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and 10 wooden kegs of alchemist's fire, each marked with a stenciled green flame. A keg of alchemist's fire lobbed at a creature or an object deals 21(6d6) fire damage on a hit. Further, the target is set ablaze and takes the damage again every round, in the case of a creature, at the start of each of its turns, until the fire is put out. A creature within reach of the blaze can take an action to smother the flames using a blanket or carpet, reducing the fire damage by 2d6. 3 such actions are needed to fully put out the fire. Agony, the tiefling ghost, hides here. If it hears the character's approach or open the door to the brig, Area 14, the ghost tries to possess one of them. It uses its host to smash one of the kegs of alchemist's fire, starting a blaze in the cargo hold. If this fire is allowed to burn for 1 minute, it ignites the other kegs and blows the last breath to flinders. Anyone and anything within 100 feet of the exploding ship takes 110(20d10) fire damage. 14. Brig. The door to this compartment is barred from the outside and has a tiny shuttered window built into it. Characters who peer through the window or open the door see the following. An elf lies unconscious on a cot. She is clad in an ornate black dress accented with silver and gold. A high collar rises behind her head. If he's present, Garganhale says, "Here's the weapon I promised you. I liberated her from a star moth we destroyed a few days ago." The unconscious prisoner is an astral elf aristocrat, Cebu's astral menagerie, named Xaryxis. She has 0 hit points and is stable. If the unconscious elf receives any amount of magical healing, she regains consciousness but remains groggy and unable to think clearly or take actions until she is aboard the character's ship or otherwise safe. Look, a princess. If the prisoner hasn't already been roused to consciousness using magic, she awakens with 1 hit point after 1 hour. Once she is awake and somewhere safe, read. The elf's gold pupils twinkle as she speaks in a superior tone. I am Princess Xaryxis, daughter of Emperor Zavin and heir to the throne of Xaryxis. Here ends part 2 of the adventure. Each character should gain a level before the next session.